Proceedings are resumed. I invite the member from the District of Easton to continue his debate.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, I would like to turn to I hear you, Minister. Sound like I cry, and that'll be the day you don't want to make me cry. Madam Speaker, I would like to turn briefly to Section 8 and 9, where this motion is, which is the genesis of this motion, Madam Speaker, for the appointment and of the Commission EBC and the review of the electoral boundaries, wherein Section 8 and 9(1) says, and the Premier read it in his presentation of the motion, that an electoral boundary commission shall, as soon as practicable after its appointment, review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided and take into account the changes or proposed changes, if any, in the number of electoral districts or of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Now,
Member, you have 1 hour remaining.
thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, the Premier and the government has one interpretation of that. With all due respect, we have a different one. Madam Speaker, but that's how this thing called law goes, eh? You put 10 lawyers in a room, you get equal amount of opinions or more. Yeah, if you put those that don't have an legal training, you'll get the practical interpretation of it. You know, quicker than me, old boy. Madam Speaker, I respectfully submit that it talks about their mandate, their terms of reference come from whether or not the changes proposed in the electoral districts, the number of electoral districts, and or the number of members of parliament of the legislature if they are proposed. Now, Madam Speaker, it doesn't say they got to have both. But in the instances where you change or you propose to change the membership, you will have both. In this case, supposedly, we are not changing the number of members of this legislature, which is we cannot reduce it, like the Premier said. I believe he said at a minimum it must be divided into 18 districts, which is true. If there is a proposed change to increase, that is done under Section 60, subsection 2. So, here we are. We have 18 members now, and we are proposing 18 single-member districts. One person, one vote, equal suffrage. That is all they can look at. It doesn't say that their remit allows them to change or propose to change the membership. Only the legislature can propose an increase in membership. Only this legislature can do that under Section 60, subsection 2. And it must conform with 59, Section 59, subsection 2. So we, as legislators, have a carved out provision in this Constitution that we can't go outside of to be able to propose an increase in the membership. And Madam Speaker, that restriction that we have on us is that as legislators, we must make a law under 59(2), 60, subsection 2, to propose an increase, but it is subject to Section 59(2), which says, subject to the Constitution, the legislature may make laws for the peace, order, and good government. So, we must satisfy at least one of them for every law that is made in here. Because remember, the legislature is made up of, consists of, Her Majesty, the Queen, and a legislative assembly. That's what the legislature is made up of. So in order for that legislature to make laws, it must satisfy one of the three requirements: peace, order, and good government. Now, if we decide in here and we debate, we decide, if the government does, hypothetically here now, Madam Speaker, that there is a need to put more people in cabinet, like we did during the discussions on the Constitution between 2006, 2009, 8. That there was too much work for 5 members in cabinet. Madam Speaker, all of us was on board with that, including the leader of the opposition and his entourage that was on those talks. We all decided that 5 members of parliament was not enough to carry out the good government of the Cayman Islands. So we agreed to increase it. PPM proposed by 2. We eventually wound up with 3. So we satisfied that section. We satisfied that section. It was, in the words of the Premier, heavily canvassed throughout the country about the increase. So there was an order in council to have a boundary commission done, appointed, to see how that would go. The same way now, there is no longer a negotiations on modernizing the Constitution, so the responsibility falls on this legislature. If there is a need for an increase, the leadership of this legislature must propose it in the form of a law. To do a law in this country, Madam Speaker, it has to go through all its stages. And one of the stages are that it must be gazetted 21 days prior to coming to this legislature. And that is, we know the reasons for that, so that the public can have their input with their representatives and the likes and the likes. Madam Speaker, we will agree, all of us, that the only way a change can come about in the membership of this legislature is if the legislature makes a law. There is no maybe or perhaps about that. Before that law is enacted, i.e., the governor assent thereto and gazette it, the governor has a responsibility to appoint a commission. Madam Speaker, the Constitution is very clear. And that's what it says. A law made under Section 59(2) may increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but no such law shall come into force, A, unless an order by the governor providing for the electoral districts and their boundaries to take account of the additional elected members in accordance with Section 89 has been made, and B, until the dissolution of the Legislative Assembly next following the enactment of such law. So that would be in 2017. Then you could increase it, if we were doing that now. So the next election would be run on the increased amount. Madam Speaker, the order under 89 that the Premier talked about, 896, as I recall, 896. If any draft order, that is from the governor, under this section is approved by resolution of the Legislative Assembly, the Premier shall submit it to the governor, who shall make an order which shall be published in the Government Gazette in terms of the draft, and that order shall come into force for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts to which it relates upon the next dissolution of the Assembly after it is made. So, the only time 62 can come into play is when the legislature proposes an increase, no decrease, an increase in the membership of this legislature. Thus my question as to why it has been brought in to this discussion surrounding single member electoral districts. And why, my further question is why the word 18 is not in there. Because there's no proposed changes for it. What are we agreeing to invite the governor to appoint? Are we going to tell her to invite the governor to set up a commission of 3 people, one appointed by the governor, one appointed by the premier, and one appointed by the leader of the opposition. Are we going to invite her to appoint these people to draw lines from the mango tree down to the grape tree and back over to that coconut tree? What's the purpose of it? What is the purpose of this debate? When it is obvious the boundary commissioners cannot recommend changes to the legislature. All it can do is review the boundaries proposed and elected membership proposed that comes from 62. Section 60, subsection 2 of the Constitution. If there are any, it says, if there are any proposals, so the only proposal that is on the table at this time, at this juncture, in this legislature's history, is to change the electoral districts and increase them to 18. Why then can't we put 18 in it? That's the question. And until that question is answered, we are spinning our wheels in the mud here. Madam Speaker, I got addressed the Premier. He said, why I didn't put 18 in mine. 2 on my file without it. He stood up here and beat me in January and didn't see that. Because he understood precisely what it said. He understood what it meant. But he also understood when he was in the opposition that the government of the day he was pressuring to pass the law. To pass the law. The Premier also understood then that it was a simple change of the election law. But he didn't say how many then either. I trust that we all remember that. Oh, it's not necessary? Well, if it's not necessary for me now, it wasn't necessary for the Premier in 2012 either. Because he was the one who went in the papers and gave a big interview to the papers, because that would make him look good, you see, in the eyes of the electorate, and jump on to that bandwagon of one man, one vote committee. Madam Speaker, we need to stop playing with this thing. We know, all of us, Madam Speaker, knows that there's a process to change the law. Every one of us know that. So my motion was calling to change the law to reflect single-member constituencies. Whether it's 8, it had to be 18, because that's the membership. But the process to change the law requires it to be in line with what the Constitution calls for. But, Madam Speaker, we are saying that, I understand that they're saying that it's the same here, it's not going to change, but this is not a law. This is a motion asking me and the members of this parliament, of this legislature, to agree to invite the governor to appoint an electoral boundaries commission. And Madam Speaker, it says in the last whereas, and whereas due to such large increase in the number of the registered electors from 2010 to date, no problem, there is a need for an electoral boundaries commission to be appointed to review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided. Agreed. Taking into account the significant increase in the number of registered electors, show me where that is in the Constitution. Proposed changes in the number of electoral districts and districts. That proposed change has come as a result of all of us now deciding that we want single member constituencies or single electoral districts. That don't come from the Constitution. And proposed changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Now, where did those proposed changes for the increase in the elected members of the Legislative Assembly come from? And what are they? We need to know. Because poor old me over here, I have not heard it before. But what we seem to be doing is to hope that the boundary commissioners come back with that. You direct the boundary commissioners in their term of reference as to what you expect them to do. Just like the other two were directed. We want you to look at splitting the country up into 17 single member constituencies. That was 2003. 2010, we want you to look at the inclusion of 3 more, making the legislature 18. We didn't give them any confined remit or TOR to say specifically single member constituencies, so they came back with 3 proposals, Madam Speaker, on how they think we should do it. One of them was single member constituencies, splitting it up in 18, which meant Cayman Brac was going to be split in 2. Am I right or not? Is it? Madam Speaker, then the government, it languished in the governor's office for over a year. An agitation by the leader of the opposition, who was, now is, the premier, myself, and the member from Northside. The government brought a draft order. The government brought a draft order. So, the draft order says, whereas in accordance with 2009 Constitution, an Electoral Boundaries Commission, EBC, was duly appointed, And whereas the EBC has reviewed the electoral district boundaries of the Cayman Islands and submitted its finding thereon to the governor and the Legislative Assembly in June of 2010. And whereas the EBC has recommended in its report that the number of members of the Legislative Assembly be increased to 18, broken down by electoral districts as follows. West Bay 4 elected members, Georgetown 6 elected members, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman 2 elected members, Buddentown 4 elected members, Northside 1 elected member, East End 1 elected member. And whereas His Excellency the Governor has now drafted an order to give effect to these recommendations, and whereas the Premier, as required, now lays this draft order before the Legislative Assembly for its approval, be it now therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly hereby approves the draft order of His Excellency the Governor, and that the order then be subsequently made in terms of this draft, so that the changes in representation of the Legislative Assembly and determination of the boundaries of the electoral district as provided therein will come into effect upon the next dissolution of the House. Moved by the Honorable McKeever Bush on the 8th, and it was received by the Clerk's Office on the 8th day of April 2011. Now, Madam Speaker, of course, the then Leader of the Opposition, now Premier, the member from Northside, and myself, being the troublemakers we were, we recognized, and Minister, you know this is true, sir, we recognize that the draft order, which was attached in the form of for the determination of it, had 18 single-member constituencies in it. The three of us recognized that, and the troublemakers we are brought it to the attention of the government, and they withdrew it. The three of us did that. So, Madam Speaker, my argument is that the EBC could not go outside what they were told, what their remit was, what their term of reference was. Their term of reference was to look at it. They never once talked about increasing the membership. They were told 18. And Madam Speaker, I hear us saying nonsense. I hear us saying nonsense over there. Oh Lord, Madam Speaker, that Premier, only him speak anything of any sense about that. All others speak rubbish. Listen, Hukar, keep him out this now. This is mine and your little this problem. Madam Speaker, their terms of reference in 2003 was to, by order in council, laid before Parliament, not ours. It was made on the 12th day of June 2003 laid before Parliament on the 24th day of June 2003, coming into force in accordance with Section 1.4 at the Court of Buckingham Palace the 12th day of June 2003. Present, the Queen's most excellent majesties in council. This order amends the Constitution of the Cayman Islands to enable an electoral boundaries commission to make recommendations on the establishment of 17 single-member constituencies for the elections to the Legislative Assembly. Okay. We did that one. And it was no, I'm no lawyer, but I'll read a little bit. Okay? You need a copy of this one too? Okay. Madam Speaker, in preparing for the eventual enactment of the Constitution in 2009, part of that approval on England's part was to make an order in council in 2009, which said electoral districts, as soon as practicable after the appointed day, that is the appointed day of the Constitution. No, the appointed day was for that. Which was made on the 10th of June 2009, laid before Parliament on the 17th day of June 2009, at the Court of Buckingham Palace, the 10th day of June 2009. It was enacted after, on the 6th of November, I think, 2009. Madam Speaker, the order on council at that time, in 2009, was as soon as practicable after the appointed day and before the Legislative Assembly is dissolved in accordance with Section 7.3, the governor shall appoint an electoral boundaries commission in accordance with Section 88 of the Constitution. The commission so appointed shall, as soon as practicable and in accordance with Section 89 of the Constitution, review the electoral district boundaries and submit a report to the governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendation for changes in the boundaries of the electoral district with a view to the Legislative Assembly consisting of 18 elected members. Now, Madam Speaker, I guess we need a copy of that too. I'll go one here. Madam Speaker, I want to know in there where we have said anything about increased membership. Somebody needs to tell me that. We had already decided it was going to be an increase to 18. It is now 18. We need not talk about increase. We need only talk about the 18 that there is. And we're splitting the country up into 18 electoral districts. That is why, Madam Speaker, I am questioning why are we not putting the number in there? Why are we not putting the number in there? And why are we talking about the possibility that the Electoral Boundaries Commission could come back with that? We don't need to ask them. We give them a specific job, and that is it. Why do we need them to propose changes to the membership? We don't. There is absolutely no need for it, Madam Speaker. That's precisely why we need to do it. We need to say 18 so no one will be fooled. The country will know that it's 18. That is the commitment each and every one of us, with the exception of the leader of the opposition, made. 18 electoral districts. Madam Speaker, I wonder why the Premier Severe is written. I wonder why he signed that petition. I wonder why he signed that petition for the referendum. Bring one copy, John. Remember you did that. Why? Why did all those young budding politicians at the time sign the petition? You didn't speak up. Why? It said 18. That's what it said. We forgotten our medium term memory gone too. Madam Speaker, that's what we have been talking about since 2011, 12, when this discussion started about electoral reform. We have never talked about an increase in membership. But the government is introducing it now. Madam Speaker, the government is introducing the discussion by virtue of the whereas number 5, whereas. And somebody said, well, it facilitates the purpose of the of debate at this stage. We have not even considered debating this thing. Oh, I've been at it for 2 hours. Sure. Yeah, to stop you. Yeah, as soon as I sit down, then I'll be right back up at you. Ain't gonna get no hotel on the tie laid round on the head tonight. Madam Speaker, the government needs to tell us, in our only objection to this motion being laid are those things. Madam Speaker, there is no need to have anything in this motion about increase in membership. And it's represented twice in it. There is no need to have it there. What is the objective of the government? That's all we're asking. If we are going to start that, if this is the beginning of that discussion, make us know. But we cannot rely on a boundary commission to come back and say that there should be an increase in membership when it's our responsibility to be leaders and get out there and tell our people that we are going to increase it. We cannot do that. It is wrong. It's downright wrong That's what leadership is about. Take the licks. Take full responsibility. And say we need to increase the membership of this legislature. Let's not wait for, or we hope that a boundary commission can do it. Cannot do that. Because 8 and 9 does not allow them to do it. It says if there are any proposals for change, and there is a proposal for change now, to change the electoral districts, the number of electoral districts, but not the number of members of this legislature, not the composition of the legislature. And Madam Speaker, I'll even concede in retrospect, the last motion I'm asking for before the 30th of June, I'll even concede that, because I understand there's times when we won't be able to say exactly, we don't have any control. I agree with the Premier. However, remember how I used to provide all that books for you too? You remember that one? Right? For him. Remember? No. Now where you win the election? Some Premier. Madam Speaker, in the appointment of the commissioners, the constitutional commissioners in 2001, the 15th day of June 2001, the Governor Stuart Jack wrote to Mr. Benson, Mr. Arthur Hunter, and Mr. Leonard Ebanks. And I ain't gonna read all the appointment letter, Madam Speaker. I'll just read the penultimate paragraph. You should aim to complete your report by the end of March 2002, if at all possible. The importance of this exercise is such that where necessary, an additional month could be granted. I should welcome an interim report of progress by, say, the end of October. And of course, the FCO constitutional advisor, Michael Bradley, is at your disposal for any advice or clarification that you might need. I read that, Madam Speaker, to say that we can put timelines on these commissions. Reasonable. He was giving them 9 months. June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. 9 months was given to them. With 1 month more if needed. These are the type of things we need to do, because if not, it's just going to languish someplace and we will never get it again. We need to come up with commitments. We need to come up with timelines on these things, or we're going to be left the same way we have always been left with these legislative directives or executive directives that mean nothing. And since we are all committed to it, let us prove our commitment and do it in order that we know we have some control over the timelines. Provide the resources for the commissioners in order that they can get it done within that reasonable timeline. with a provision with provisions for the some flexibility built in to ensure we don't rush them, but at the same time, they can work at and get the job done. Madam Speaker, I'm not asking much. We're not asking much. We're saying, yes, we're changing the electoral boundaries, districts. But let's say what we're changing them to. Let it not be any question as to, or any doubt as to what the intent of this motion is. Right now, it's left up into the air, and nobody knows precisely what to expect. Madam Speaker, I am going to allow the government to answer to these amendments, and it will be interesting to hear that all of the government supports these amendments, because that's what this country can expect. Whether it's a difference in interpretation or not, Madam Speaker, we need to hear why the government is proposing this without a definitive number and a definitive timeline, but more importantly, a definitive number of districts that the country should be carved up into. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak to the amendments as proposed? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, just to say briefly on behalf of the government that I spent a considerable amount of time going through the basis for the motion when I introduced it, the substantive motion that is, and I sought to deal at length with the concerns that had been expressed by the members from East End and Northside publicly with respect to them. The position taken and the explanation which we have heard from the honourable member from East End this morning and this afternoon in general represent a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the constitutional provisions, specifically Section 89. And I doubt if anything I say now is going to help his understanding of that section. There is also a fundamental misunderstanding on his part on the ability of this Parliament or anyone else to proscribe or circumscribe what it is that the Electoral Boundary Commission can do. They are mandated, and the parameters of what they can do are circumscribed by the constitutional provisions. Neither this House nor the Governor can change that. Section 88, subsection 9 specifically says that no one can direct or control the operations and functions of the Electoral Boundary Commission. We can make proposals, but we cannot seek to circumscribe what it is that the Electoral Boundary Commission's report says. Ultimately, it would be for this House to decide whether or not to accept or reject those recommendations, but it is not our role. It is unconstitutional for us to seek in any way to try to circumscribe what it is that the Electoral Boundary Commission's report actually recommends. And so, Madam Speaker, for the reasons I articulated this morning, and on the basis of what I've just said, the government cannot accept any of the proposed amendments as put forward by the member from East End in his motion, which has been seconded by the elected member for Northside.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the elected member from the District of Northside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to speak directly to the proposed amendments to the motion, and I will speak to the amended motion or the unamended motion when I get the opportunity. The first amendment that we propose is to insert 18 after the words divided into. And the Premier has said that we don't understand the Constitution and we're misinterpreting it, and there is no need to put the number in. Madam Speaker, the main reason that we need to now insert the number is simply because the Premier in his motion introduces Section 62 of the Constitution, and also in another whereas speaks directly to increasing the members or propose changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Without those two things, I would agree with him. There would be no need to insert 18 in the second whereas, if those two matters were not in the substantive, other parts of the substantive motion. And Madam Speaker, I'm not a lawyer, but I find it strange that the most honorable lords at the Privy Council could issue an order that the Boundary Commission be directed to establish 17 single-member constituencies in 2003. And they were not directing Boundary Commission. But if we put 18 here, somehow we are crossing the boundary and tampering with their independence. But let me speak briefly to this halo of independence we're putting around this Electoral Boundaries Commission. Because, Madam Speaker, we only have to look at how the appointments are made to understand clearly that the only purpose of this Electoral Boundaries Commission is political. The Governor appoints the chairman. The Premier, as leader of the PPM, progressives, regressives, whatever they are now termed, appoints one. The leader of the other political party appoints one. Now, Madam Speaker, I don't know what they can do this time around. I can only go by what they did for the last two. In 2003, the person appointed by the PPM was a full member of the PPM. The person appointed by the UDP was a full member of the UDP. 2009, the same person was reappointed by the PPM, and another person who at that time was a staunch supporter of the UDP was appointed by the UDP. And we come down here and say, no, they're independent people. They're not going to worry about the political aspects of the boundary and how it's going to affect their party. That is their only concern. To draw the boundaries as they see fit to help their party, if possible. And Madam Speaker, I don't have anything with any of those three persons who were appointed. I respect them all. I believe they did a fantastic job. But, Madam Speaker, in 2003, the mandate for the Electoral Boundary Commission was very specific. 17 electoral districts. In 2009, 2010, we basically gave them no direction. We appointed them to look at the three members and where they thought they should best go. Now, Madam Speaker, they didn't give us one recommendation that they thought was best for the country or best for the party. They gave us three recommendations which allowed the political party in power to choose which of the three recommendations that they wanted, and they picked the one that they believed suited their chances best in the next election. Added two to Georgetown and one to Bordentown. Madam Speaker, the Premier made a big deal about the increase in the number of electors. The membership of this House, when it was increased from 12 to 15, was not done with any reference to the number of electors in the country. It was the politicians sitting in this parliament. I was here who decided we needed help in cabinet and we increased it. I wasn't here when they did the 2009 Constitution, but all of the records indicate that it wasn't done within a reference to increase in number of electors. It was done by politicians for politician purposes because we believed we wanted to increase it. Now, and I will agree that Section 60 wasn't in the old Constitution. Now, we are introducing, and we say that we're really not asking them to do this, but we put a whereas in, we put a resolve in, that, in my view, invites them to make a recommendation to increase the membership. Because we've had a 20% in the increase in electors. We have filed an amendment to remove all reference to Section 60 from the motion, which will not allow them to make a recommendation to increase the membership. And in particular, or if we put in the 18, then they're going to be hard pressed to FDADLA recommendation to increase the membership if we say we want 18 electoral districts. Unless they're going to honor that curious thing with Kim and Brack and have them getting two representatives with 2 votes or 1 vote or whatever they wanted on their own, right? And Madam Speaker, so the reason that we believe it is now necessary to reinsert in the terms of reference to the Electoral Boundaries Commission the number of electoral districts that we want is because nobody in here that I am aware of has advocated or is advocating for any increase in membership. Okay? So, if we agree that we don't want any increase in membership, why are we giving the Boundaries Commission the ability to recommend increase in membership based on increase in voters? So we have filed an amendment to remove that section. Or if the Premier will simply put in the 18, then he can leave the 16. He can leave section 62. Because I believe that they are duty bound to stick to the 18 electoral districts. And if they want to recommend increased membership, they have to recommend more than one member for at least one of those 18 districts. And our instructions is 18 single member electoral districts. But if we give them the option, then we're going to be down here then fighting the recommendation of this independent body who knows what is best for the country if they say we must have 19 or we must have 21 or we must have 25. So, Madam Speaker, like I said, if they don't want to take out the whereas about 60, put 18 and I'll vote for the motion. But if they don't put in 18, they don't take out the reference to 60, and they won't delete the words proposed changes in number of electoral members of the Legislative Assembly, I am going to vote against the motion. You know, I don't normally tell you how I can vote, no vote that way. Now, Madam Speaker, because, Madam Speaker, you see, we're trying to make ourselves, the public, believe all sorts of stuff here, right? Because we're trying to find a way that somebody else, we can blame somebody else for recommending an increase. Because, Madam Speaker, I have heard rumbles. The EIU has reported to me, right? And I know they say that the EIU is always wrong. I'll accept some of that. That some people would like to see another minister in cabinet because the workload is so high. But in this economic times, we politicians smarter than that. We ain't coming down here and make that proposal from us. But if this independent body under 60 chooses to do it on the basis of us telling them that the electorate has increased by 20+%, then we have a good reason to do it. And, Madam Speaker, I'm going to leave my response to the Premier chiding me and why I'm here and what I'm doing and everything else to my debate on the substantive motion. But you know I can answer you. So, Madam Speaker, I have serious concern because not only is the government bringing in section 60 subsection 2 in the whereas, but in another whereas, they repeat their subtle requests from the Electoral Boundary Commission to invite them and propose changes in elected membership of the Legislative Assembly. If we're not proposing any changes, delete it. Because we are inviting them to propose changes to the membership. And, Madam Speaker, I've been searching the calendar on my phone, calendar on my computer, all the calendars in my house. I can't find in good time. And I'm a person, one of my first lessons in management was you set deadlines and you work to those deadlines, even if you have to move the deadline. But in good time is too indefinite for me, for the Northside representative. I would like to delete in good time and put 30th of June 2015. Now, if the government comes back here on the 29th of June or sometime in May and says, well, the Boundary Commission has tabled their report, but the legislative department and government under the Attorney General can't get the amendments that need to be done to Section 5 of the election law done in time, we need to go to September, I'll give them the bly. But if we don't have a deadline, how can we measure the progress of the Electoral Boundaries Commission? And Mr. McLean quoted from the governor's letter to a former constitutional commission that it is quite in order for the governor to put in the terms of reference deadlines for them to meet. How else can we hold them to any kind of performance standard as that? So, Madam Speaker, those are the reasons why I seconded the amendments to the motion, and I believe they are important amendments to the motion, and if the government does not accept any of the amendments to the motion, I will be voting against the motion as it is. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak to the amendments? If not, I'll call upon a member from Easton to exercise his right of reply if he so desires.
And I give you my 145 minutes that I didn't use.
Madam Speaker, I thank you.
You know, listen to me, say, all them over on the blackberries. As usual, when I talk, and none of them listen. Not a one of them. But the TV can show that.
Madam Speaker, it really, really bothers me that this country, just in May last year, elected 18 members to serve them in this parliament, in this legislature. And only 3 of us speaks. Madam Speaker, the fact that we took this issue to the election and we talked about it there. We beat the living blood out of it, the living life out of it. When it now comes to a position where these electors, these legislators are required to get up in here and let this country know the position they take on issues of national importance, such as this, and no one gets up. That really bothers me, Madam Speaker. And by extension, I would tell the people of this country it should bother them too. They should be extremely concerned in that, Madam Speaker, there will always be a difference in opinion in these hallowed halls. We will always have a difference of opinion. I don't say I'm right. I don't think either member in here says that they're right. No one has the answers for everything. But certainly we have an opinion on what we believe and what we understand our people to need and want. I believe that it is of paramount importance to the democratic process that we express those positions. I believe that's why we were put here. I believe that the people expect it of us. The people in this country elect people who they trust as their representatives. And they expect that the representatives will lead their country in their best interest. But they also expect during that period that the people tell them what their plans are. Madam Speaker, I believe that the government, in rejecting these amendments, has much to answer to. And the passage of time will tell whether they get punished or get rewarded. Madam Speaker, the people of East End didn't ask me to be right all the time. They say advocate on our behalf. And that is what I intend doing as long as I am here. Madam Speaker, the Premier in his response, and you know, Madam Speaker, talking about that, I really don't understand how the others who sit there, and I know they are much more capable than just sitting there. Every single last one of them. And to think they would make the Premier speak on their behalf, the behalf of their constituencies? Wow. I can understand the 6 from Georgetown, the other 5 from Georgetown, but no others. If he is leading the Georgetown charge, then I can understand him speaking on their behalf. Well, he say he's leading the government. That means he must have got zipper on the rest of their mouth, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to think that the Premier would get up here and say that what we are trying to do is circumscribe what the EBC should be doing. No, Madam Speaker. Far be it from me after they are appointed to do that, because that's the only time you can do that. But what needs to happen is we need to tell them what the objective is from this Parliament. Under 62, if we make a law to increase the membership before it's come into force, a EBC has to be appointed. That in itself says that they know exactly what it is. There is an increase. Circumscribing what they have to do is after they have been appointed. This is not after they have been appointed. This is asking, inviting the governor to appoint them with a term of reference to split the country up into 18 electoral districts. What part of that is circumscribing their responsibilities? Madam Speaker, I just can't understand where the Premier is coming from with that. There's a misunderstanding on mine and the member from Northside part, according to the Premier, of Section 8 and 9. And Madam Speaker, he has said that he has consulted his legal advisors. I don't know who they are, but I have consulted mine too. And the same way he can say that I have a misunderstanding of it, so does he. He has no authority on knowledge around here. And he says that my advisor are advising me incorrectly.
And you don't have no employer relationship with your advisors. They can give you an advice. Don't worry about your job.
Well, I am saying that his is advising them incorrectly too. I think that's fair. But it appears like the only person around here that knows is the government, or the Premier for that matter. Madam Speaker, we just need to understand the objective of the government. It's their prerogative. They have the numbers. That is why nobody needs to speak. They have the numbers, and we respect that. Or it would be the tail wagging the dog. But I understand that the government will always have its way, and they have no right to stop me from having my say. I understand all of that. But certainly, Madam Speaker, there must be room for us to talk about these things in order that we can come to a conclusion that is in the best interest of the country. Madam Speaker, this House is made up of 18 members and the 2 ex-officio members. What are we doing with it? What are we telling the governor the terms of reference for this EBC must be? That's all we are asking. The Premier's response is that I have a misunderstanding of 8 and 9. We just need to know. Is it 18? Is it 19? Is it 20? What is it? Is it 21? What is it? But the other response is, why didn't I put it in my motion? No, Madam Speaker, if that is the only response to justify it not being in theirs, I think that is poor. That is certainly not worth staying. Madam Speaker, the government must have its way. I'm going to make sure that the government does not stop this real estate over here for the people of East End from having its say. I promise you that. That ain't gonna happen. Regardless of their legal opinions, their legal positions, I have the right to bring these motions. Madam Speaker, I don't think it was unreasonable for us to bring an amendment to the government's motion. I don't think it was. More so now that there has been no justification expressed for those provisions to be in there, or the 18 not being in there. There has been none, no explanation. But certainly, Madam Speaker, I shall wait to see what the substantive motion brings. Maybe they are contemplating bring their own amendment, and I hope that is the case. And then we will see whether or not we can support that. But I can't support something, Madam Speaker. I can't agree to invite someone to do something and I don't know what they're doing. And the only reference is in the last resolve. And one of those references happens to be the proposed changes to the elected membership of this parliament, of this legislature. I can't support that. When I know the public has not endorsed that, when I know it has not been proposed here under 62, and this government is representing those two things in this motion. Madam Speaker, this legislature has absolute authority over its membership. And it must not, we must not give that responsibility or hope that responsibility is taken up by someone else. There is no need for it. We must do it. Madam Speaker, I wish not to circumscribe what the EBC has to do. But I wish to direct them on what we want them to do.
How they do it, we are saying nothing but in
How they arrive at our general direction and wishes, it's up to them. I will not interfere with that, and I don't encourage any other member to interfere with that. But we must tell them what we want done. Madam Speaker, I gave you 2 copies of the orders for the other ones, and they were told specifically what to do. That responsibility now, because of the circumstances, it fell squarely on the shoulders of council in England. That responsibility has now been passed to us because our constitution is in place and the provision is put in there. Why are we allowing ourselves to pass the responsibility on to someone else that we have to govern this country in the interest of peace, order, and good government of this country. We gonna make someone else outside do it? Regardless of how independent we say they are. And there's no independence because they're appointed. But that's besides the point. We hope they're independent. We must tell them what we want. They must not tell us what we need. We are the leaders. Madam Speaker, if this is the way the government wishes to do it, then that's up to them. But you must lead. The Premier talk about leading from out front, and you must have people behind you. Well, Madam Speaker, he has everybody behind him besides two people. The leader of the opposition. And we don't know about your good self, Madam Speaker, because you have made any utterances on this matter. And I'm not inviting you to do that because I think it should stay that way. But that's 16 out of 18. Well, 15 behind him on it. 15. That's how we lead. And you know, you ain't got no blindfold on me. But if that is the wishes of everybody, why aren't we saying it? Why aren't we saying we want it into 18 single-member constituencies? What are we hiding? What are we hoping for? At the very least, that, you know how you got to do that, but you want me to trust you. The Minister for Health. Madam Speaker, what is it we want them to tell us? They must tell us nothing. The authority lies right here on what we want, what this country needs. Madam Speaker, I just beating up my gum because I did my best. Sometimes I feel like I'm a lone wolf in the Mojave Desert crying. Am I that wrong, Madam Speaker? Was that what the Premier were referring to about what's going on in my head? Am I that far out? After 14 years of experience in here, being an active member of the negotiation team on the Constitution, finding legal advice that is as good or better than anything the Premier has. Am I that far out in the left field that I need to be checked? That this is something subversive in my country? Am I? I need to know. Am I? Maybe I've been here too long, Madam Speaker. That might be what it is. I don't know. I know what.
Member from Easton, sorry to interrupt, but we've reached the hour of interruption. So I'll call on the Honorable Premier to move the suspension of Standing Order 2.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that the business of this House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
The question is that Standing Order 10-2 be suspended to enable the House to continue beyond the hour of interruption. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
I believe the ayes have it. Accordingly, Standing Order 10-2 is hereby suspended. Member from Easton, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I won't be very long. I should have told you then that I would have done it within a few minutes. But, Madam Speaker, I was just going to say, lastly, every one of us have agreed I heard the Minister for Work saying, no increase. We don't want an increase. We are not proposing an increase. Nevertheless, we have it in here. We are talking about it in here, in the recitals. We're only saying, take it out. And we will be there with you. We will be there. I reached out. I don't know if that was rejected. So obviously, we want 18 single member, unless of course somebody now hiding behind something now. I don't want to hear when we come back now that it really meant to increase it. And we're putting the responsibility on the EBC. I hear the Minister for Health say trust them. Trust but verify. I need that Ronald Reagan thing, trust but verify, old boy. I ain't messing with trusting. That is why I am so cautiously optimistic sometimes with you all. Madam Speaker, since it's 18 we want, put it in there. Put it in there. I would like later on, because I know they ain't going to pass this, they got the numbers, Madam Speaker. And then they're going to take their motion through, with or without the member from Northside and myself. I would like, and I'm calling on the governor today, to make public the letters of appointment for this commission that is to be, and the terms of reference. That is fair. That is reasonable. That is expected by the people of this country. Too much controversy has been surrounding this subject. It brought one government down. Madam Speaker, I dare say it has the potential of bringing others down also. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the amendments to Government Motion 1, 2014-2015, Cayman Islands Constitution Order, be passed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
I believe the noes have it.
Madam Speaker, can we have a division, please?
Certainly, Madam Clerk, please call a division.
Now you won, my son.
Honorable Alden McLaughlin.
No.
Honorable Moses Kekano.
No.
Honorable Kurt Tibbetts.
No.
Honorable Osborne Bawden.
No.
Honorable Wayne Panton.
No.
Honorable Marco Archer.
No.
Honorable Tara Rivers.
No.
Honorable Anthony Eden.
No.
Mr. Winston Connolly.
No.
Mr. Roy McTaggart.
No.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
No.
Mr. Alva Saku.
No.
Honorable McKeeva Bush. Mr. Barney Bush. Captain Eugene Ebanks. Mr. Ezra Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Arden McLean.
Aye.
The results of the divisions are as follows: 2 ayes, 12 noes, and 3 absentees. Therefore, the amendments have failed. Does any other member wish to speak on the substantive motion? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Does any other member wish to speak on the substantive motion being Government Number 1, 2014-2015? Recognize the 5th elected member from the District of Georgetown.
My exploits. Madam Speaker, I rise to add my brief contribution to the substantive motion, and I hope that it will be a crystal clear one. Whilst I did not actively campaign on what is being called the one man, one vote proposal, I have always stated, when asked, the same exact thing. And in fact, I signed the petition. I am and continue to be perplexed at the continued questions over my and other independent candidates' views or acceptance of the concept. And I will simply put that down to media sales and possibly politics. For the record, I believe 100% in equality of franchise. I support 100% one person, one vote, and I accept 100% single member constituencies. I trust, therefore, Madam Speaker, that my position has now been made abundantly clear to everyone, and that after my vote today, there will be no ambiguity. And that, Madam Speaker, I end my contribution. Thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too will be brief. Just to say that in February, when we first discussed such a motion, at the time I said that we could not afford any distractions. I think I recall saying that because at the time we had only completed one budget. And now that we have completed 2 budgets and we are on a fairly good path to doing what we set out to do, I can honestly stand here and say that I am happy that this day has come, that we can get this behind us and continue to do what we are trying to do, which is to get the country back on sound footing. And as I promised then, and I'm saying now, certainly I look forward to the 2017 election when we will go to the polls to vote to be politically correct, one elector, one vote. I still like the ring of one man, one vote, but nevertheless, I think some people get all upset. They want to say one person, one vote. One elector, one vote, presumably is the correct terminology. So, Madam Speaker, I am not easily distracted, and I will ensure that all of the political wranglings that will come in the next 2 years will not distract me, but I will continue to do the job that I have been doing, and then to prepare myself for the next election in the manner in which it will be conducted. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the fourth elected member from the district of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would also like to rise to give my support, which I don't think will be of any surprise to anyone in this House, this honorable House, to this government motion. And I always knew the day would come, Madam Speaker, that I would pick up a little beating from the member from East End. But I'd like to thank him for not making it too harsh. But there is a reason why I did not speak to the amendments to this bill, this motion. And it's because I think that this government has spent the time necessary discussing this issue, going back and forth with each other and others to ensure that we were doing the right thing. I know that we hold ourselves to very high standards, and I think the government has made the commitment, to my satisfaction, that the end result of this process will be what I started out fighting for when I first became a member of what was then the One Man, One Vote Committee. So, Madam Speaker, I am satisfied. I didn't see the need to amend this motion. I am satisfied that the government is carrying out its mandate from the people. And I can assure the members from Northside and East End that I certainly would not be participating in any sort of trickery or deceit or hidden agenda to accomplish anything other than what we started out to accomplish. I think everybody should know me well enough by now that I know right from wrong. I was raised in a household that taught me that, and I would not participate in any of those sorts of activities. And I continue to learn, exactly. Madam Speaker, the government has worked extremely hard, I think, to gain consensus on this issue now and to reach the point where we are. Today is going to be recorded as a historic day in our history. It is going to be a day that we finally achieve equality, something that we have fought long and hard to achieve. And I'm proud to be one of the members of this government who is going to make that a possibility. There really isn't a whole lot left for me to say on this issue. I alluded earlier, Madam Speaker, to the fact that I was one of the original members of the One Man, One Vote Committee. At that point in time, my political career was not even starting. And I am grateful and thankful to the members of that committee. I won't try to name them all now because there were so many. But they did set out to accomplish something that I thought was noble, something that was needed by the country. And I applaud them all for their support and dedication. And, you know, I'd like to congratulate them for what they have done for the country as well. Madam Speaker, my first debate on One Man, One Vote, single member constituencies, one elector, one vote, I discussed the need for equality. being one of the most important aspects of what we were doing. I recently gave a television interview and I alluded to votes being considered political currency, and I still believe that. One individual having more currency than another could potentially lead to situations where people are taken advantage of or their needs may be ignored. I wouldn't think that anyone in this honorable house would stoop to those levels, Madam Speaker, but there is a possibility, and I believe our job here is to protect equality and freedom of individuals. I did acknowledge that there was a concern, Madam Speaker, that the size of the constituencies may have been an issue for some. There is the possibility that some unscrupulous individuals may try to influence a vote in a small constituency. But I have a lot of faith in Caymanians and our people, Madam Speaker, and I do not think that we have arrived at the point where that would be at all possible. I think Caymanians are still proud of where we have come from. We have very high standards and we hold each other to those. And I really am not concerned at the fact that a smaller group of voters could be bought or led down the wrong road through means that were not ethical. So I've pretty much taken that concern out of my mind, Madam Speaker. There were some examples in the last election that helped me arrive at this point where I did see some questionable practices, things that I would consider vote buying, even if the authorities may not have at the time. And it didn't work. I saw individuals who were trying to influence the outcome of the vote in Bordentown on behalf of certain people who were involved in the election. And, you know, I did make a few reports because I was concerned. And at the end of the day, it made no difference. Bordentowners decided that they wanted a change and they voted for the individuals and the candidates who they thought represented that change. There are those, Madam Speaker, in particular in this House, who may think that I am doing damage to myself politically by encouraging single-member constituencies. And who say that I could not possibly win a seat in a single-member constituency situation, but I'm not too concerned about that, Madam Speaker. It just means I have to work harder than I did before. But I do not plan to relinquish my seat without a fight. People of Bordentown put me there, and until they decide that I am no longer worthy of holding that seat, I'm going to hold on to it and I'm going to fight for it. But, Madam Speaker, I am doing what I know is right, regardless of the outcome. And if in 2017, the people of Bordentown decide that I've done enough, then I will accept my fate. But until that day, I plan to fight for the privilege that I've been given to represent Bordentowners, and I will continue to do so. I was elected by Bordentowners to do a job, Madam Speaker, and one of those tasks involved in that job was to fight for equality, to fight for one person, one vote, and single-member constituencies. If the voters decide in 2017 that that was all they needed me to do, then so be it. But I don't think that that will be the case. Madam Speaker, Romans 13:1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that are ordained, the powers that be are ordained of God." So when God decides it's time for me to move on, people will let me know. But no one individual, no man, is going to tell me that he can decide my political fate or future. I don't care how powerful or influential. I've heard the comments, Madam Speaker, and those that have made them know who I'm talking about, but I won't call any names. I have no plans to be a career politician. I have no wish to stay in this house until I become impotent and useless, hanging around just to agitate and irritate. I will know when my time has come. And I remind myself every day of how fleeting this opportunity is. And I make the most of this opportunity every day. Madam Speaker, it is time for accountable leaders. It is time for people who truly want to answer to the people. Single-member constituencies is one way to ensure that we, as representatives, answer to the people we represent. No passing the buck, no blaming someone else. It's time for people, leaders who can stand up and say, I am the person you need to speak to. I am the person who represents you. I am the person who will ensure that you are looked after and that the government understands what it is that is required to make your life better. Madam Speaker, 1,396 people voted in favor of single-member constituencies and one person, one vote in the referendum in Bordentown. Ironically, I was elected with 1,393 votes. 3 votes different. It could be a coincidence, but that 3-vote difference speaks volumes to me. And throughout this process, I have decided to never turn my back on those 1,396 voters, because I do believe that a lot of the votes that put me in office were those same individuals. And I believe that that's where I got this mandate from. At times, Madam Speaker, I fought to keep my word, and I fought sometimes to the discomfort of my colleagues, and I do apologize to them for any discomfort I've caused them, because it was never my intention, and I've said this before, to cause this government any sort of division or strife or discomfort in the positions I took. But I did feel strongly enough about this issue, Madam Speaker, that at times I may have acted very strongly and spoken out very strongly. But that's not to say that other members of this government did not feel the same way. My experience was, I think, a little unique in some instances, and I think that led quite a bit to my commitment to seeing this happen. But I think everyone on this side understands my dedication to equality and accountability and electoral reform, Madam Speaker. And I am pleased today that my colleagues and I can stand here and do this together. Madam Speaker, in Bordentown, 1,396 people defied the government of the day and came out, often at my request, went into the polling stations and voted in favor of single-member constituencies. And at the end of the day, when the votes were being counted, I sat in the counting station for a vast portion of that time. I was in the counting station by myself, because we were operating. Obviously, we didn't have the resources that the government had at the time. And, you know, I worked that day, Madam Speaker, from 6 in the morning until the last vote was counted. At times, it was just me staring down the entire entourage of the United Democratic Party representatives. And I did notice at times that they were taking great pleasure in the fact that we didn't seem to be achieving the level of success we hoped we would. But the process, I think we all can agree now, was not completely fair. I do believe the bar was set way too high. The time of year was not complementary to having a referendum. And of course, the government took a side. And there were many people who felt intimidated and felt that their showing their faces at the poll may have been to their detriment in some way, shape, or form. Throughout all the obstacles thrown at us, Madam Speaker, we refused to back down and we did not show weakness. Today, we are getting what we fought for and what some people felt too intimidated to stand up for. There were those of us who had to actually fight for those who felt intimidated, and to even some who felt even too intimidated to even come to the polls, but who assured me that come 2013, they would speak loud and clear. And they did. Those individuals kept their promise to me, and today I'm keeping mine. There are those, Madam Speaker, that say that this issue is not that important, considering the unemployment, the level of crime, the landfill issues, tourism challenges, and many others. But Madam Speaker, equality is the main ingredient for a healthy democracy. The right to vote should be equally available to everybody. And the spirit of democracy will only be respected if people are given the right to vote without discrimination. The exercise of the right to vote, Madam Speaker, adds to an individual's self-respect, dignity and pride, and sense of responsibility. In other words, it is the bedrock of a truly democratic system. So how can we say that this issue is not important, Madam Speaker? If the former government did not feel that your right to vote was important enough to fight for, is there any wonder there are so many people suffering in this country today? Is there any wonder there are so many people hungry and unemployed? Is there any wonder there is so much blatant discrimination against Caymanians when our own government failed to acknowledge that we were deserving of equality? I know I'll take some licks for saying that, Madam Speaker, but the people that I represent feel the same way. And no one can tell me that they don't. No, I won't even go there, Minister Borden. I won't even go there. Madam Speaker, the right to equality in voting took a back seat against other issues, and has taken a backseat for far too long. And today it is a time for us to strike a blow for those individuals who have been left out, overlooked. This is one important step that this government must take in correcting a wrong. And I am proud to say that we will be the government to do it. Madam Speaker, when I stood up, I said there wasn't really much else that needed to be said. And I will try and stick to that. But I do want to acknowledge two individuals who fought side by side with the One Man, One Vote Committee. They are now no longer with us. Mrs. Consuelo Ebanks, Miss Melanie McLaughlin. And I hope that in their memory, this entire House decides to support this motion today. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, no one need wonder or ask where I stand on this matter. From the day I heard them talking about one man, one vote, I opposed it, and I do not support the move today. I do not support the move from our voting system that we have had since we've had representative government. It has not failed us. It has done us no wrong. And any shortcomings, Madam Speaker, I believe that we can straighten it out without changing and going into something which I believe, and hear me today, Madam Speaker, and to the member just sitting down and the rest of them, hear me. This is going to be something that will not help these islands in more ways than one. It might not manifest itself immediately, although some of them that ranting and raving about what the last government done, they will find out when they have to go face that bunch out there alone. They will find out. Madam Speaker, there are those that do that now. The two members, East End and North Side, they run in single-member constituencies only because they don't have a bigger number of people. That's the only reason. But I cannot support the move from our system that we have, and we have had successfully, that has done no wrong to this country. This started, Madam Speaker, I don't know where it started exactly, but I know when it hit West Bay, it was, we're going to get rid of McKeever Bush. We're going to go single-member constituencies. And yeah, well, they've been trying. That won't happen that way. But they will find out. Let them go ahead. What I do know, Madam Speaker, that we don't have the numbers to stop the government from going ahead. So my vote will still be no. I do not see, nor has it been successfully argued, how this is going to help these islands. I hope that each member who have pushed for this, save those that have voted in single member districts for all these many years, how this is going to change anything that brings betterment to the people of these islands. Equality? Well, how are you going to get equality? By splitting the district up in 4? Or Georgetown in 6? Or Bordentown in 4? I don't see that. And it hasn't been proven to me. There are people that shifted from other forms of voting to this single member. And they wish today, up until I was in Barbados, I was told that they wish today they had moved. But I guess we have to prove things ourselves. We are that kind of people. We have to prove it ourselves. So we will wait and see. But I can tell you, the die has been cast. If you go that way, you're going to get something. You're going to get more than you asked for. You're going to chew off more than you can swallow. Putting it simpler, Madam Speaker, it's not about who you're going to keep out. I suspect that there will be some over there who will be running for cover once it goes into effect. You can believe that. But I don't see this argument as just given by the member from Bordentown, who seems to forget that he was UDP at one point. That's where he cuts his teeth politically. And I suspect if he wanted him, he would have had him too. But he couldn't wait, Madam Speaker, so he jumped and went on the other side. But I leave them alone, Madam Speaker. It seems to be something that he's enjoying, and I hope he is enjoying it. Yeah. Madam Speaker, he says that if we, Madam Speaker, that had include the Speaker, because they were part of the government at the time, that because we didn't go into this voting system, he said that's why Caymanians are suffering. Oh, yeah? Well, why they made it so good all the other years, Madam Speaker? What kind of system you had then? If that is the reason we are suffering today, because I did not move from the present system to single member, why then did we were so successful in all the many years? And let's not put our country down and say we were not successful. We were. We still are, as far as I'm concerned. We got some challenges to face. But we're not dead. We're not dead. But, Madam Speaker, I would ask him to explain it. I don't know where he came up with that blarney, but I can tell you that he hasn't convinced me that he has said anything there in that sentence that makes any sense. Why we have unemployment, he says, is because we didn't have equality in voting. Tell me now how that could equate to unemployment. Tell me. Tell me how that could equate to the numbers of burglary rising from last year, where they were, to however many more it is at this point in time. Tell me how it equates to that. Tell me, Madam Speaker, where the single member district will prove any different in that. The only difference is that you're going to be able to vote for one person. Accountability, Madam Speaker, some people don't really, they like to twist that word so much that they got it around the other side now. Madam Speaker, isn't it better in a district of 4 people for the constituent When they can't find one, they can always find the next. Isn't it better that way, Madam Speaker? Isn't that more accountable as a group, as a government, as members of this legislative assembly, rather than going to cut your district up in 4 or 5 pieces, and you go to that one, and you can't find that one, well, who you gonna go to? Where? Replace him the next 4 years. Yes, maybe. Maybe that person would be smart enough in a small district to win back his seat, though. Maybe he wouldn't have been so easy won in the bigger district. Well, what my people in West Bay told me, we're not so fool that if we got 4 representatives, we're going to choose one now. And you know what? That is simply put, but I certainly believe that's the way it is. I believe that 4 people that you can hold accountable and get something done, rather than trying to hold one accountable and you can't get anything done, but who will do it after that? Who? Yeah, but you still don't get anything done. Not about somebody saying when they run from Mr. Bush to Mr. Ebanks or Mr. Jackson, whoever it is, and they say, well, you go to that one in the big districts I'm talking about, in the 4-member districts. Go to that one. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's about being able to get something done. Whichever one of the 4 do it. Whichever one of the 4 do it. But if you only got one, who are you going to run to? Who are you going to run to? No, this has not been answered to me. How the changes is going to make us better off as a people. It's not more democratic than what we have now. You're voting for one, you can vote for one now if you choose. You got 4 in 4-member districts. So, Madam Speaker, I don't need to belay the point here. I certainly it has not been proven to me that what is proposed to be done is going to make my district of West Bay any better off. What I see happening in our country is those areas in our country that we have problems with. That is what I know, and none of us can deny it. Those areas are easily can become the garrisons that we've been talking about. And hear me, cuss me and say whatever you want. If people don't see that that is a possibility, then you're blind and unwilling to see what is in front of us. You can. You think I don't see what's happening in West Bay Northwest as different from West Bay South or West Bay Central? You think we don't know what happens here in Central Georgetown as against what will happen in Northwest Georgetown or North Georgetown? And so on? I don't see this doing any good for us. Maybe the party that won campaigned on it. Maybe they did. I didn't listen to very many of their meetings. And I don't know if that was a central theme in their campaign. What people will do in a campaign is different from what they do when there is that one question put before them. However you put it, completely different. So I keep saying, and I will repeat, it has not been proven to me that this is going to make life for our people any better. This is not going to stop the banks from taking away people's homes. It's not going to bring down the burglaries that our people are experiencing. It's not going to cut down unemployment. So you say it is better for democracy. Oh, yeah? Well, I can tell you. What destroys democracy is some of those things that I just mentioned that we are experiencing and doesn't seem to be able to do anything about at this time. No matter how hard you work, there are circumstances that will not allow you to get things done in the environment that we are experiencing in Cayman, which tumbles over from the metropolitan countries. And of course, our own local issues compounds those things. So I am not going to vote for this. I don't support moving to 19 members. And we tried that. We talked about 17. They wouldn't agree with that. We even, at one point, they were talking about 21. Trying to get a balance between what would be the government and the backbench. But if you had 17 and you had 7 members on government, you still had 10 members that could upset the government if need be in a so-called democratic move. I don't know why we're going to want to add another one, more cost to this country. I don't know if it's going to mean more representation. I don't know. I think that the motion should be very clear about what they're going to do. Whereas in the second whereas, it says that the government is desirous that the Cayman Islands be divided into single-member district electoral districts. That should say 18. I agree with that, if that was an argument, because that's what you're aiming to do. Leaving it that open then gives rise to, I guess, the second to last resolve. It gives rise to it. That says, following the making up of an order by the governor pursuant to Section 89(6) of the Constitution for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts of the Cayman Islands, the government thereafter submits to the Legislative Assembly a bill to make the necessary amendments to the elections law in accordance with the said order to enable the establishment of single-member electoral districts in the Cayman Islands, with each elector having one vote. Again, it did not speak of 18 members. We need to say what we're doing. We need to say to the people of the Cayman Islands that that is the proposal. That's what we want to do. We want to increase from 18 to otherwise whatever that number is. So I find that the motion is not being open enough. It's not saying what they are. It's not saying exactly what they want to do. And I thought in such a motion, such an important motion before the House, that it should be absolutely clear. Are we going to change the membership of the House from the numbers we have now to add one more, or what? You need to say that, Madam Speaker. I hope that the mover would make that clear. Not by saying this is clear, because this is not clear. Make it clear if he intends to increase the membership of the House. The other thing, Madam Speaker, that I would draw attention to is that the District of Cayman Brac, as I understand it, the proposal is to split the district in two to make it single-member districts. I've always argued in favor of the Cayman Brac people because I know what they said. They did not want their islands cut up. They want to be able to vote across the board. That was my understanding from them whenever I talked to them. And also, Madam Speaker, I could not take the position that we must have one country, two systems. I don't believe that either. How do they treat the Cayman Brac situation? Well, you can't say, excuse me, that you're doing what the Cayman Brac people want when the Cayman Brac people say they don't want single members, and you're splitting it up in two. You can't say that you're doing what Cayman Brac wants. And then you can't say that you're doing right in a small country like this by saying one country, two systems, one for Cayman Brac, one for Cayman. So how the government gets around it, I will wait and see. I am not going to waste a lot of energy on this matter. I will talk about it in my district, and I will talk about it in other areas, because I don't believe that we are doing the country any good by going this route. As I said, it hasn't been proven. Talk, but talk is cheap. Say anything. Grammar said tongue say anything after learn talk. So, easy to talk and draw scenarios about democracy and adduce to that how things work in other countries as against how we operate in our islands. It's easy. You can say that in many of the Commonwealth countries, they have single member districts. But you should pay attention to what happens, in particular, in and around us, closest to us, and you can look further afield to say, but is that something I want? Or if I'm trying to make change for the better, shouldn't I look to see something that will make us better other than what those people got, because they didn't have it any better, or they're not having it any better? So why should I take their example? No. The premier said that some time ago that he wouldn't have been pushed into this, but I guess the poor premier has taken a beating from his back bench. And I don't know if any of the front bench pound him up, but I would suspect that the back bench of the government must have taken a toll on him. But I would say to everyone over there, look at what all those countries that have single member districts, whether it has made them any better. Look at our situation. And don't just look at your yard and say, well, everybody's like me. I'm cool. I can handle it. I can cope with it. Me and my wife can teach our children. Unfortunately, that's not the case throughout the country. That's not the case. What we can handle as members inside this house, there are too many people out there that can't. Therefore, we're setting up ourselves to take a beating, not only us, because I see myself going another term, if that, and then younger ones coming in to take over. So it's not me. The only thing is that I hope to be around many years. And so I would see what happened to our islands. And I have grandchildren. I have people around that I care about. And we don't want to see us setting a situation because of so-called democracy that we say we don't have. It can make us better. That's what they say. Change it, it can make it better. I don't see it. I will not support that, Madam Speaker. And I implore those members, before they jump into this, look around and see how you can improve what we have. Not take away from it or move it out before you've proven that you got something that will make us better off as Caymanians. We've protected these seats in our Constitution for many years, Madam Speaker. Setting up a district like Georgetown, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't. You know who you're going to get, where from. And I have nothing against the country being inclusive. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we are so unsure about what obtains in and amongst us. Now you can come back after me and say all sorts of things as the member said before I got up. That doesn't help the situation. And if you all haven't learned that yet, I don't know. That beating up on me hasn't helped you all. No matter whether you change the government, it haven't helped you all. Beating up on other members from the East End North Side hasn't helped nobody. Give consideration to how you can make this better before cutting those districts into pieces. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable First Elected Member from the District of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the unique position that I'm in this evening, I supported the motion when it was first brought by the two Eastern District members. I know that within my government that it was a bit unsettling, but as people that have been around me for over 20 years know that I am not really a person that will toe apart the lines for the sake of being a party. During the election, Madam Speaker, the majority of people that I visited with indicated to me they wanted to see single member constituency, one person, one vote. As I listened, Madam Speaker, to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, having the cautious observation and being in politics nearly 30 years, I have also heard some of these concerns, especially, Madam Speaker, from the older people. But my responsibility as a representative in the democracy in which we live is to use my voice for the majority of the people. And let us hope, with God's help, that we will not see a deterioration in the living conditions here in the Cayman Islands. I want to say thanks to our Premier for seeing and understanding and feeling the temperature that had arisen around the topic of one person, one vote. Madam Speaker, it seemed like these islands were being consumed, but nothing else going forward but to deal with this. It is now here before us, and it will be my responsibility this time to once again vote yes for one person, one vote, single member constituency. And I trust that as we go forward, it will bring us closer together. Because I have to tell you, after 22 years, I am so sick and tired of hearing the political wrangling throughout the airwaves and the newspapers and whatever. It's time to us to get back to basics, to think about the people in our islands, how we can help them. people out there that are suffering every time it rains, their roof is leaking. They need proper toilet facilities. And here we are beating our gums up constantly, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, about things political. It's time, Madam Speaker, these islands get back to the basics and do what the people want, not we as individual politicians. Thank you for your time, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize this second elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and for allowing me some time to share my thoughts on the motion that stands before us this evening. Madam Speaker, this is an issue that's been around for the better part of 3 years, as far as I recall, that we have been debating, discussing. It's been the subject of a referendum. We have discussed these matters back and forth. Madam Speaker, in my mind, it's time to act. It's time to put away the political wrangling and whatever differences we may have. I believe that the country has spoken, and this is the way they would like to see the country move. Madam Speaker, I was never a part of the one man, one vote movement as it became known. I did, however, support their efforts. I voted firmly for one man, one vote in the referendum. Whenever I was asked in the campaign, I always stated my position that I was in favor of what was contemplated. And despite many public statements on my behalf, there still seemed to be some lingering doubts as to where my position lay, like my colleague, the 5th elected member from Georgetown, also took the opportunity to state. And so I too would like at this point to unequivocally state my position, that I am unequivocally in support of one elector, one vote in single member constituencies. I am delighted that this motion is here before us, for it does, assuming it passes here today, or at some point in this assembly meeting, whether it's today or tomorrow or another day, it will set in motion that process that will bring this matter to reality in this country. Madam Speaker, I have been a part of the debate that has taken place within the government caucus in terms of the drafting of this motion, and we've debated it and talked about it long and back and forth. And my personal belief is that the resolutions in here are unequivocally and sufficiently clear that it deserves our support in voting to support it. I can state confidently that there is no ulterior motive here. There is no underlying agenda other than to bring about one elector, one voter in single member constituencies. And it is on that basis and faith in this government that I am supporting this and taking this forward. I would hope in conclusion, Madam Speaker, that I would plead with my colleagues from East End and North Side to reconsider their position as well in supporting this motion and join us as we try to bring this matter to a reality, because I think we all want the same thing here, no question about it. And I do have to say we have to give credit where credit is due, and credit to these two members, Madam Speaker. They have kept the pressure up. And I'm convinced that the reason we are here, part of the reason why we're here, because there was that commitment as well within this government. I give you credit. I will take credit. We're at a historic moment in this country and in the evolution of politics and an electoral system in this country. And I'm looking forward. I certainly will be supporting this motion when the vote is taken. And I'm looking forward too to voting on and seeing the full implementation of one elector, one vote when that time comes in the future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the sixth elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to offer a very brief debate on and my comments on this government motion. Madam Speaker, I would like to first congratulate the Premier and this government for the democratic and regardful way in which it arrived at the position, at this most important position we have now taken on this most important and emotive subject. Madam Speaker, we as a government on a day-to-day basis are pulled and tugged and stretched in many different directions with the many, many, many challenges and issues facing our beloved country today. And, Madam Speaker, the issue of single-member constituency, one person, one vote, was certainly a major distraction. And once taken office, this government debated and struggled with it. Then the private member motions came, and we debated and we struggled with it again. And then, Madam Speaker, under the leadership of the Premier, this government and its caucus committed itself to working towards a resolution, and therefore, here we are today. Madam Speaker, when I'm out visiting on the weekends usually, I too get a lot of representation, and particularly, like my colleague, first elected member from Bordentown said, from the elderly, stating their confusion surrounding the matter, stating their confusion, their concerns about garrison politics, about abuse of the system. Madam Speaker, I am a firm believer that when you have these problems, it is not normally the system, it is normally those who are participating in the system that causes such abuses and irregularities as we may be concerned about. Madam Speaker, we all understand change. We all understand that without the caterpillar going through a metamorphosis, that we cannot get the beautiful butterfly. Madam Speaker, I believe that whilst it may not be perfect, and only time will tell that, I certainly believe that this is a good start, a solid foundation towards the development and the advancement of our electoral system and towards equality amongst voters. Madam Speaker, personally, I didn't base my decision on fear of change, or on fear of remaining the same. I didn't base it on politics, nor intimidation. I based my decision on what I believe is best for the future of these islands. Madam Speaker, I support this motion, and I am proud to stand here today to say that I will vote yes on this monumental moment and this important period of advancement in our country's electoral system. Madam Speaker, at the end of this vote, I hope we can close this chapter, shut this door, end this circle, whatever we want to call it, Madam Speaker. What is important at this point is that we now move on and leave in the past what is over. And like my colleague, the Minister for Finance, Mr. Archer, I too look forward to getting back to working on some of the challenges and issues facing our people and these countries and this country. Madam Speaker, I close with saying that not a day passes that I do not continue to pray, to seek guidance, and to seek the strength to focus on trying to steer this good ship, the Cayman Islands, on a safe and prosperous course. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to joining my colleagues in voting yes on this important motion.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, like many of my colleagues, I will also endeavour to be brief in my remarks. But Madam Speaker, I think it is incumbent upon me to once again speak to the issue that is at heart for me in being a part of the government that is bringing this motion forward, and that is that of equality. Madam Speaker, as I expressed in this Honourable House back in February 28th, the issue of equality and striving and promoting equality is something that has been a guiding principle of mine for as long as I remember myself. And the reason that I personally support moving to a system which, as the Honourable Premier has mentioned, may not be the perfect system, but a system that is much more equal in its basis, much more cognizant of every person's right to have equal participation in the political process, is an improvement, and it is a better system. And whereas many of us, myself included, also often strive for excellence and strive for the best, in some instances, in order to get us one step closer, we have to make that step. And Madam Speaker, it is also incumbent upon me to recognize that as the second elected member for the District of West Bay, I truly represent in this instance a district divided on this issue, if you are to go by the results of the referendum that took place in July 2012. Madam Speaker, but for 20 votes, you pretty much can say that that district, or the District of West Bay, the district that I represent, have essentially equally voted in support, but also equally voted against, even though the referendum failed in that district, as I said, by roughly 20 votes. And so, Madam Speaker, as one of the representatives from that district, in putting my support behind this motion and this step, I am demonstrating leadership. And oftentimes, leadership is what is required in order to take us in the direction or take us forward, even though it may not be seen as the politically popular thing at the time. And so essentially, by standing here, I know that I obviously represent, and as a representative, I strive to represent the interests of my people and my constituents to the best of my ability. But in this instance, there is no clear mandate from the people of West Bay. Nonetheless, they elected me as one of their leaders to take the position and to take decisions as a leader. And as such, I stand here and say that I support a system where everybody is able to have equal participation in the electoral process, one that I recognize may be seen as taking away certain rights currently enjoyed, but at the same time, it is not making anybody any less able or any less equal to participate in this process. Madam Speaker, so taking this, what may be seen as a bold step to some, I continue to demonstrate leadership by tackling the difficult issues facing this country. Many of the issues, as was articulated here today, issues of human capital development and employment, issues related to helping to improve and helping to take our education system to higher heights, issues dealing with labor, pensions, and, Madam Speaker, fighting for and promoting gender equality as a mainstream consideration. So, Madam Speaker, yes, changing our electoral system will not solve, so to speak, a lot of these issues that the country is facing. But what it does say is we, as leaders, are willing and able to take bold steps in some instances to lead. Madam Speaker, a concern of mine that I have with respect to any significant change such as this is that our people are properly and adequately prepared from an education and understanding perspective. This, Madam Speaker, in my mind, is only the first step. It is incumbent upon us as a government and as individual elected representatives in our respective constituencies to ensure that we help to educate the people about what such a change will mean for them personally and practically. Because, Madam Speaker, that fear of change is often because people don't understand what the change will bring. And so, as I said, I am not here to sit down and defend any one system as being perfect. And I think it is only right that when we talk about moving to a system of multi-member constituencies to single-member constituencies, we talk about and we try to find ways to mitigate the negatives that may ensue as a result. Because as leaders, we are required to do that. And yes, it may have been, some of us in this room may have campaigned, some of us may have built our political career on this idea. I personally did not having been a member of the then one man, one vote, as I'd like to say, one elector, one vote, and I applaud the government for ensuring that this motion is gender sensitive and gender correct. But Madam Speaker, the campaign is over. And so for me, this is more than just a campaign promise fulfilled. This is something that I think that the country as a whole will benefit from. Not to say that there will not be concerns or that there are not concerns that need to be addressed, that need to be articulated, that need to be ventilated, and that need to be mitigated. And so It is my hope and it is my expectation that the government will, with the support of the opposition in asking whatever questions they feel necessary to do so, that we will help to educate our people about what this change will mean so we better prepare the people for the upcoming 2017 elections and beyond. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the Honorable Premier if he wishes to exercise his right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to start by thanking all members who have spoken, whether in favor or against the motion, for their contributions to this very important national debate. It is an important part of the democratic process that all of the possible positions are properly ventilated and that the country benefits as a result of that debate. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, we might as well have a system where all it amounts to is that someone or someones just make the decisions and that's the end of the matter. Madam Speaker, in the end, it seems neither the elected member from East End nor North Side were interested or are interested in the debate on the substantive motion. Their contributions have been limited to in the case of the elected member from East End, a very extensive debate on the merits or demerits of the motion and their proposal as it relates to their proposed changes. Madam Speaker, I doubt if anything I say further is going to have much impact on the seemingly intractable position that the two members have with respect to the motion. But I do think it is important that I reiterate what the government's position is, what in our view and in our considered view and the view that we have formed based on proper legal advice, what the effect of the various sections of the Constitution that have been discussed amount to. The first position, Madam Speaker, is that contrary to the assertion which was made by the two members in the case of the member from East End many times, that we were seeking to, or we are seeking to increase the membership of the House to 19 or any other number. It is clear from the motion that there is no such proposal by the government. Madam Speaker, the sections in the recitals in the Constitution which the elected members from East End and North Side have complained about, particularly the fifth recital, which recites section 60, subsection 2 of the Constitution, is simply lifted from the Constitution. It has no paraphrasing from myself or anyone else, and it simply recites what the Constitution says, that the Constitution provides that a law may be made to increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but that no such law can take effect until the governor has had appointed an electoral boundary commission and that they have produced a report to take into account the proposed additional elected members. Madam Speaker, we put that in there for the sake of completeness, to ensure that everyone understood that any increase in membership of this House requires a substantive law, and it also requires the carrying out of an electoral boundary commission. There is no assertion in the motion anywhere by us or any proposal for any increase in membership. The fourth recital, Madam Speaker, that is complained about, which simply says, and whereas Section 89 of the Constitution provides that an electoral boundary commission shall, as soon as practicable after its appointment, review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided, and taking into account the changes or proposed changes, if there are any of them, in the number of electoral districts or of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, shall submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for any changes in the number and boundaries of the electoral districts. Madam Speaker, unquote, Madam Speaker, that is the precise wording of the Constitution. We haven't done a single thing to it. So whether it appears in this motion or doesn't appear in this motion, it is as binding as ever. So, Madam Speaker, I don't know what the issue is with respect to that. And Madam Speaker, the second resolved section, which provides as follows: and be it further resolved that following the making of an order by the Governor pursuant to Section 89(6) of the Constitution for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts of the Cayman Islands, the government thereafter submits to the Legislative Assembly a bill to make the necessary amendments to the Elections Law 2013 revision in accordance with the said order to enable the establishment of single-member electoral districts in the Cayman Islands with each elector having one vote. Madam Speaker, I have turned this over in my mind time and time again. I've consulted with some of my colleagues, I've consulted with the Attorney General, and none of us can find any possible basis for a complaint about that resolved section. In fact, Madam Speaker, we would have thought that the members from East End and Northside would have welcomed a commitment by the government to bring a bill to amend the elections law in accordance with the order made by the governor, because that is what they have been asking for in the two motions which they have filed, for the government to bring a bill to amend the elections law. If we didn't put in that kind of a resolved section, we would have heard the complaint that, well, the government isn't serious, they're just going through the motions. Where is the commitment that they're going to actually amend the elections law? Without an amendment of the elections law, none of the rest of this process is going to have much effect, because it is the elections law in conjunction with the Constitution that governs the electoral process. But I believe, Madam Speaker, that again, this demonstrates the sort of basic lack of understanding of what the constitutional provisions actually mean. And is a representation of the fear that the members from East End and Northside seem to have of the possibility of East End and Northside being combined. And Madam Speaker, I've said the cat amongst the pigeons again, but Madam Speaker, None of that is being proposed by the government in the motion. And the members from East End and North Side ought not to let their paranoia about this issue cloud their judgment and cause them to misinterpret what are the very clear words of the constitutional provision. Madam Speaker, I've heard the elected member from Northside said that unless the amendments which they had proposed were accepted, he's going to vote against the motion. Madam Speaker, I guess we'll have to wait and see if that is the case, but there would be a certain irony about the fact that a member who has campaigned for the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years consistently for a move to single-member electoral districts would, when a government, because he was a member of a government too that didn't bring it, when a government finally has the spine and resolve to bring such a motion, that he would vote against it. But we'll see, Madam Speaker, we'll see in due course, no doubt. Madam Speaker, the final point is this concern that they have articulated, that the motion doesn't specify that the government is desirous that the Cayman Islands be divided into 18 single-member electoral districts. Madam Speaker, I went through this at the start when I introduced the motion, and I pointed out that the Constitution presently prescribes 18 elected seats for the Legislative Assembly, plus the 2 official seats and the position of Speaker, which is not an additional seat because the Speaker can come from outside the House. And in Section 60, it provides that a law may be brought to increase the membership of the House. And then there's the provision which I referred to a little while ago, saying that it has to before it can come into effect, it has to be preceded by essential Electoral Boundaries Commission's report and an order from the governor. But, Madam Speaker, there is no need to specify in the motion how many single-member electoral districts. The government is not proposing another seat. If we were, we would have said so. But I come back to the point that I have made, as we say in Cayman, over and often in the course of this debate this morning and this afternoon, is that the members from East End and Northside do not accept or do not seem to accept the constitutional provision which says that the Electoral Boundary Commission is an independent body and that no one can direct it what to do. In Section 88, subsection 9, I'll read it again. In the exercise of its functions under this Constitution, an Electoral Boundary Commission shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. And so it operates within the parameters of the constitutional mandate it has, and it is entitled to have regard to proposals made by this House or other people, but it is not required to accept those proposals. And no matter what is proposed by us, in the end, as long as they are following the constitutional mandate, they are entitled to make whatever recommendations they see fit. It is then a matter for the House, once the draft order is brought, to decide whether or not those recommendations are to be accepted or not. But it does not lie in the mouth of any member of this House or even the governor herself to tell the Commission what recommendations it is to make. That is a point that cannot be made too strongly. And it is important that the members from East End and North Side understand that even though they are representatives of their districts, they are not in a position to direct or control the Electoral Boundary Commission's functions. No one is. Madam Speaker, that is why in Section 89 of the Constitution, there is provision for the draft order which the governor would make on the basis of the report being subject to modification. And if I, as Premier, on the basis of the position taken by my caucus, disagreed with some of the recommendations, we would be entitled, through me as Premier, to bring a draft order to the House with modifications to address the concerns which we have, as long as I provide a statement to the House as the basis for those modifications. The House would then vote yea or no with respect to the draft order and the statement. So there is a process built into the Constitution to take into account what the elected members of this House may feel about the Electoral Boundary Commission's report. There is a process which allows members to make proposals. But it is not the role of members of this House to try, as the elected members from East End and North Side keep suggesting, to direct or control the functions of the Electoral Boundary Commission. It is unconstitutional. It would be unconstitutional to do so.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order,
Please state your point of order, member.
there has
from
been
East
no
End.
time that I have tried to direct the functions of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. I have said they need to be given terms of reference. Now, after those terms of reference are given, then no one, the Constitution makes it very clear, no one can direct them on how they go about it. And I think the Premier needs to stop that.
Honorable members, as I recorded it and as I take cognizance, the Honorable Premier to this juncture has indicated that the members from East End and North Side cannot direct or control the EBC, and that if, and that is the operative word, they did, it would be unconstitutional. He has not yet reached to the point where he has stated that you are or are desirous of directing them. Honorable Premier, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to pick up on the point about the terms of reference, the terms of reference are proposals. As long as it's accepted that the terms of reference are in effect proposals to the EBC, then that is perfectly in order. Madam Speaker, shall I demonstrate by having a quick look at the report from 2010? If I can put my hands on it, I had it here.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, the report from 2010 of the Electoral Boundary Commission I'm just trying to make sure I get the names of who the commission were correct. It was Mr. Carl W. Dundas as chairman, Mr. Norman Borden as a member, and Ms. Adrienne Webb as a member. And this report was, it's called a 2010 report. I'm not sure exactly what month it was delivered. But in the preliminary part of the report, section 4 is called Interpretation of the Mandate. I'm going to read it word for word. It's on page 2 of the report. Unlike the terms of reference of the 2003 Electoral Boundary Commission, which required that the Cayman Islands should be divided into 17 single-member constituencies, The terms of reference of the current EBC requires the EBC to review the electoral district boundaries and submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for changes in the boundaries of the electoral districts with a view to the Legislative Assembly consisting of 18 elected members, with at least 2 members being allocated to the sister islands of Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. The terms of reference does not require the EBC to recommend single-member constituencies. The Electoral Boundary Commission can, of course, take the issue of single-member constituencies as an option, as well as a multi-member constituencies with a combination of single-member where practicable. The Commission's mandate is set out in full in Annex 1 here too. The point of my reading that short section is to say that despite what the terms of reference say, it is still open to the Commission. It is still open to the Commission to make the recommendations which they think are necessary and appropriate. So this government have only made one proposal. The motion only makes one proposal, and that is that the Cayman Islands is divided into single-member electoral districts. We did not specify how many. We know that there can be a minimum of 18 constitutionally. That is set. But it's a matter now for the electoral, or will be a matter for the Electoral Boundary Commission to decide whether they feel, given all of the circumstances, that there ought to be another electoral district. We are not proposing that. We are not proposing another seat. But what we are not doing is trying to circumscribe their discussion and conclusion on this issue. Now that, Madam Speaker, I know does not sit well with the members from East End and North Side, but that is the position that the government has taken. And we have spent a long, long time thinking and talking about this matter, Madam Speaker, and we are settled and comfortable in the position that let the Electoral Boundary Commission look at the situation, look at the numbers of voters in East End and North Side, how small they are. Look at the significant increase in electors over the course of the last 3 years, and come to their own view about the number of electoral districts. We can, as a House, accept it or reject it. It is their report, but it is our decision. That's the way the Constitution has set the system up. And we say, let the EBC go and do their work. Madam Speaker, I hope that that has addressed the concerns which have been raised by the members from East End and North Side, and I think there was a suggestion, although I wasn't in the chamber at the point, I'm told there was an observation, may I say it that way, by the leader of the opposition, that perhaps the specific number of districts ought to have been included as well. So I hope that that has gone at least some way to address those concerns, to assure the country and the members from East End and North Side that there is no underhandedness going on, that the government is not proposing anything but what is in the motion, and that is the division of the Cayman Islands into single-member electoral districts. We are not proposing an additional seat. We are not proposing an additional district. It is a matter for the EBC to look at all of the circumstances and make their recommendations. Madam Speaker, this is one of those very important points in the life of the country, not just the life of this Legislative Assembly. This issue of single-member electoral districts, single-member constituencies, they've been called for most of the time I've been around, and one they say one man, one vote, does never sat well with me because I always felt that women should be allowed to vote too. But the concept of equal suffrage has been discussed from almost the time I came to the House in November of 2000. And we are at this critical juncture this evening when this House is to vote to make this a reality. I am honored and privileged to be leading the government which has had the courage, the foresight, and the resilience to battle through the political storms that we've had to encounter over the course of the last 14 months to reach this point. I do hope, Madam Speaker, that when the vote is called, that we can rely on, I won't say every member because that would be disingenuous. The leader of the opposition has made his position clear for as long as I know that he doesn't support it. But I do hope we can rely on the other 16 members of the House to support this very, very important motion. And Madam Speaker, I commend the motion to the House.
The question is that be it therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly agrees that the Governor should be invited in accordance with Section 88 of the Constitution to appoint an electoral boundary commission, and be it further resolved that following the making of an order by the Governor pursuant to Section 89(6) of the Constitution for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts of the Cayman Islands, the government thereafter submits to the Legislative Assembly a bill to make the necessary amendments to the Elections Law 2013 revision in accordance with the said order to enable the establishment of single-member electoral districts in the Cayman Islands with each elector having one vote. And be it further resolved that the process be completed in good time so as to ensure that the general elections due in 2017 are conducted on the basis of single-member electoral districts with each elector having one vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
I believe the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, may we have a division?
Madam Clerk, please call a division.
Honorable Alda McLaughlin.
Aye.
Honorable Moses Kekaro.
Aye.
Honorable Kurt Tibbetts.
Aye.
Honorable Osborne Borden.
Aye.
Honorable Wayne Panton.
Aye.
Honorable Marco Archer.
Aye.
Honorable Tara Rivers.
Aye.
Honorable Anthony Eden. Mr. Winston Connolly.
Aye.
Mr. Roy McTaggart.
Aye.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Aye.
Mr. Alistair Koo.
Aye.
Honorable Makiba Bush.
No.
Mr. Barney Bush. Captain Eugene Ebanks.
No.
Mr. Ezra Miller.
Abstain.
Mr. Arden McLean.
Abstain.
The results of the divisions are as follow: 12 ayes, 2 noes, 2 abstentions, and 1 absentee. The motion is carried. Can I have a motion for the adjournment? Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I move the adjournment of this honorable House, I just have to note that this is indeed a signal moment for the Cayman Islands, and I can't help but note that only the government which I lead have actually voted in favor of the introduction of single-member electoral districts and the concept of one person, one vote. Madam Speaker, with those few words, I move the adjournment of this honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
The question is that this honorable House be now adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, this House now stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.